We now move to leaders' questions. The Crown Deputy Pearse Doherty.
I also want to welcome Commissioner McGrath back to the Houses here in his position, and also to welcome the Women's Shankle Group who are here with us in Leinster House as well. You are very welcome here today. Ahanashe Yarwin Fignery Board Tinati Honihenu and Rudata all the Chinati Yanahan Agashishin Gold Keysna Smock Fuel so as quick fingate Rishin Labian Agus is were policy at a Frigger Shaw. Taoiseach, today's Residential Tenancies Board figures confirm what renters already know, and that is that rents are out of control and your policies are responsible. And this isn't something abstract. I spoke to a couple last week. Taoiseach, they're renting, they both have good jobs. The plan was simple: save hard, buy their own home, and one day start a family here in Ireland. But they couldn't take the rent increases anymore, and they knew that there was more coming. So last week they were left with no other option but to move back into his parents' home, back into his childhood bedroom. And now their plan has changed. Their plan now is to save money, to book flights and head to Australia. Taoiseach, this couple are 26 and 27 years of age. This is what non-stop rip-off rents have done to their future, and it is a direct result of your policies over decades that have driven this rent crisis to boiling point. And the crisis that has resulted now in 5,400 eviction notices being issued in the last quarter alone. Your policies are not getting young people out of box rooms, you're putting them back into them. In the last year alone, both new rents and existing rents have risen by 5% across the state. But in some counties, the increases have been truly shocking. Leitrim up 16%, Carlow up 15%, Longford up 14%. The average new rent now in this state is €20,000 a year. In Dublin, the picture is even more brutal. The average new rent in Dublin stands at €27,000 a year. Taoiseach, this isn't an accident. This is the direct result of Fine Gael's approach to housing and to renters, letting the market run wild, protecting profits and abandoning ordinary people. Average rents were less than €1,000 when you became minister, when you took up your position in cabinet. Now they're nearly double that, Minister. That means that people are now having to pay over €9,000 more a year in rent than when you took office, and almost €10,000 more a year here in Dublin for new rents. And you're going to make matters worse. From March of next year, tens of thousands of renters will see their rent reset to the very top of the market. For some, this will mean a doubling of the rent. So I ask you, Taoiseach, how high are you willing to let rents go before you intervene? Is it €3,000 a month, 4,000, maybe 5,000? What's your cut-off point? Because young people can't take this pressure any longer. You're pricing them out of homes, out of family life and out of their own future. And what did renters get in this year's budget? Well, they didn't get the promise that you made to them that you would increase the renters' tax credit. They didn't get that, but landlords are going to get an increase. They'll get a €1,000 tax break next year. Workers get no tax cut at all, but developers get €250 million of a tax break for apartments that are already under construction. Once again, the government made clear political choices, landlords and developers over renters. Taoiseach, our position is clear and it's simple. You need to end the rip-off. You need to get rents under control. You need to make housing affordable. That means cutting rents and freezing them any further rent increases for the next 3 years to give renters breathing space and to stop this relentless upward spiral. So here's the question. Are you going to finally act and cut rents and introduce real meaningful three-year rent freeze? Yes or no? Or are you going to continue with Fine Gael's failed approach that has already driven rents through the roof? While you sit at the cabinet table, rents have gone up on average €1,000 a month to the point that it costs €27,000 for a new tenant here in this capital. It's shameful.
Well, thanks very much, Laskin Corla. Good morning. Firstly, I want to join with colleagues in welcoming our former colleague, Ireland's friend and our Commissioner in the European Union, Commissioner McGrath, and thank him for the job that he is doing in the European Commission on crucial areas at this time. I also want to join with you, Deputy Doherty, in welcoming the Shankill Shared Women's Centre to the public gallery today, and thank you for the important work that you're doing also. And can I please also join, I know on behalf of people right across this chamber, and indeed with the people people of Ireland in sending our solidarity and support to the people of Hong Kong and to all of the families affected by the horrific apartment block fire last night. Truly devastating and deeply disturbing, and we think of all of those impacted at this very difficult time. Deputy, there's a kind of a rhythm to your questions these days, which is where you selectively quote from publications that have just come out, but you may not have had a chance to fully read it yet, but the RTB report out this morning does show something that you chose not to share with Dáil Éireann or not to share with renters, which is that the ESRI's individual property level analysis shows that 62% of properties nationally saw no change in rent year on year. And that number is up. It's up by 4.8 percentage points compared with the previous year. So yes, we have a real challenge in terms of housing. Indeed, it's an emergency. But we are now seeing a situation where the number of rental properties not seeing an increase has now increased further than last year and now stands, hang on a second now, give me a chance, Deputy, and now stands at 62% of properties. So more than 6 out of 10 people. It also finds the benefit of the rent pressure zones, because it finds where rents have increased, that's disproportionately in areas not covered by rent pressure zones. And you like to talk a lot about what's happened since the election. Well, what's happened since the election is this government that was re-elected and reformed took a decision to extend nationwide the rent property zones, including to your own county, to Carndonagh, to Buncrana, Lifford, Letterkenny, Milford, Glenties and Donegal Town, areas that were not covered by rent pressure zones up until we brought in those measures in recent times. And I've no doubt that that's also going to provide much assistance and protection. Yes, we are seeing a churn in terms of landlords coming into the market, landlords leaving the market, but we're actually also seeing more tenancies than before. Nationally approved housing bodies have seen their registered tenancies grow year on year and quarter on quarter. Private tenancies have also grown annually to 240,751. And in Dublin, an area where there's often particular acute housing pressure, registered private tenancies rose by 4.3% annually to 108,174. You say your position on rent and rental protections is clear. I'm not sure it is, because I genuinely don't know today whether Sinn Féin supports rent pressure zones or not. Deputy Eoin O'Brien didn't support them, said we're going to get rid of them and replace them with a reference system that the Housing Agency and the ESRI, both independent of government, said would not work, would be extremely complicated, wouldn't work, and I believe would have actually pushed up people's rents. And yet I heard your own leader on national radio saying that scrapping RPZs would remove the only modest protection. So I'm not sure if that's discontent within the Sinn Féin party. Is Owen telling the truth? Is Mary Lou telling the truth? Which is the policy of Sinn Féin when it comes to renters? I'd also point out, you mentioned the rent tax credit. When this government was returned to office, the rent tax credit was due to expire. We took a decision to not just increase it for a year, but to actually increase it and keep it there for the next 3 years. It was going to go to €0 and 0 cent until we took the decision to put hundreds of millions of euro of taxpayers' money into the rent tax credit. So your position when it comes to rent pressure zone is Jekyll and Hyde stuff. It truly is. We're bringing in a series of rental protections, and I want people listening into this to know that we brought in on the 10th of June a series of new rights and protections for both new and existing tenants, including ending no-fault evictions for larger landlords with 4 or more tenancies, including bringing in rent controls, extending them nationally through the RPZs for the first time ever from the 20th of June, and we're already seeing the benefit of that. So yes, there is a housing emergency, but there are some signs of encouragement in terms of the number of properties now that are not seeing an increase in rent this year, and that is up on last year.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Doherty.
Taoiseach, do you really, in your heart of heart, believe that young people who are listening to you, like that couple that I was speaking to last week, 26 and 27-year-old, they're back in the box room of their family, back in their childhood bedroom. They were supposed to build a house here, start a family, live here in Ireland. They're heading to Australia. You try to deny the reality that's out there. The RTB are very clear. Rents are going up. They've gone up over 1,000 in the last year. New rents and existing rents have gone up. Every year since you've been in Cabinet, rents have gone up an average of €1,000. The bare facts, not my facts, the RTB's facts have told us very clearly that the average rent now that renters have to find for new rents, they have to find €9,000 more since you took office in Cabinet. In Dublin, they have to find 10,000. Do you think it's appropriate that new renters have to pay €27,000 a year in rent in Dublin? Our position is very clear. Ban rent increases. Stop filling the pocket of landlords. And you know something? Maybe you tell the truth. You told the public, you made a solemn promise to them that if you got re-elected, you would increase the renters' tax credit. You broke that promise, like so many others, Simon. Because Simon says on one hand, Simon does on the other hand. The election is over and Simon doesn't care. You have prioritised landlords, developers, and you have left renters abandoned. And that's the reality of it. Every year rents are going up and you have no plan to fix it. Indeed, you're going to make it worse because you're going to allow landlords to reset the rents right across the board in March of this year. And it is appalling. And that is why young people have decided to abandon this country in search of different futures.
And I'll take the same latitude on the clock as well.
Of course you will.
Thank you. I don't understand the Sinn Féin policy that opposes every single support for small landlords to try and keep them in the market and then wants to make sure we have more rental properties available. How do you wish to have rental properties without landlords? And yet you demonise small landlords across this country and oppose every single measure. Mom and pop landlords, people in my constituency and yours, renting out one property or two, you demonise them. We need them to stay in the market. Yet you want to drive them out and increase rental property. It doesn't make sense. It's probably why you're celebrating your 15th anniversary as the opposition spokesperson on finance. 5 finance ministers later, you're still sitting in the same seat because the people of Ireland don't trust you when it comes to the economy. They know that the angry jack-in-the-box routine doesn't build homes, Pearse. It doesn't build homes. It doesn't build homes. And last count, angry Pearse, and last count, in the extra time available to me, in the time available to me that was available to Deputy Doherty, can I point out that there's only one party in this House that is receiving very significant financial funding from builders and construction companies. The published accounts of Friends of Sinn Féin in the United States of America show that of your €366,000 in donation, you know where the bulk came from? Construction companies and builders. You know where the biggest donation came from? One construction company in America that gave you $20,000. You tell the young people of Ireland you're on the side of the working people, and Mary Lou flies out to America to take the dollars from the big businesses, big companies, big builders. You are the party of taking big money from big American building companies. You are a hypocrite.
You've got your time. Please, order.
I'm making the grass blushing up there. Buddy, I have an embarrassment from a finance minister.
Just to reassure Taoiseach.
Happy anniversary.
Nothing to say to your renters about.
15 years.
Nothing to say to your renters about.
Offering nothing positive to anybody. Not you, Pearse.
When the two of you are ready, we can continue. Deputy Keener Callan.
Benefiting people in Donegal for the first time ever. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And just to reassure you, Taoiseach, and anybody else in the House, as you interrupt and the clock goes on, I'm fair in relation to compensating on the other side. But it's very difficult at times because, well, the show goes on. Deputy Keener Callan.
Last Corla, I want to join others in welcoming the Shankill Shared Women's Centre. You're very welcome here. It's great to see you. And also Commissioner McGrath, and join with the Taoiseach in terms of our thoughts are with all those affected by the devastating fire in Hong Kong. Taoiseach, the cost of living crisis may have ended for Fine Gael, but for ordinary families it's getting worse day by day. Food, heating, electricity, rents, college fees are all more expensive than last year. CSO found recently that food prices alone are up 4.5% in the last 12 months. People are paying more, getting less. I'm wondering how they'll stretch their wages to the end of the week. Taoiseach, everybody outside of government can see what's happening. The fact that you can't see it is astonishing. So let me spell it out for you. Price Watch compared 25 supermarket staples over 3 years. In 2022, a basket of everyday items cost €87. The same basket now costs a whopping €135. That's a 55% jump in just 3 years. The price of bread is up, eggs have increased by 50%, and chicken has more than doubled in price. These aren't luxuries, Taoiseach, they are basics. Ireland now has the second highest food prices in the Eurozone, 12% above the EU average. Families are being fleeced. Taoiseach, the skyrocketing cost of food is not just visible in euros and in percentages, you can see it in the stress and anxiety etched into people's faces when they're at the supermarket till. People who wonder how much further they can stretch their pay packets. What was once a simple routine of the weekly shop has now turned into a painful choice between essentials, between putting food on the table and heating the home. Impossible choices being faced on a daily basis. Taoiseach, the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission and the Central Bank have found that food prices are increasing way beyond the costs of producing food. In other words, price gouging is taking place. Somewhere along the supply chain, someone is pocketing the difference and people are left to carry the burden. Taoiseach, we have a food regulator whose job it is to shine a light on this, but your government has tied its hands. Right now, it can only ask for information. It cannot compel supermarkets or processors to hand over data. Dunnes Stores has already refused to cooperate with their investigation on the price of eggs, fruit and vegetables. The regulator's chair, Joe Healy, has pleaded with the government for stronger powers since last year. He's still waiting. Families are still waiting. And we in the Social Democrats are not prepared to wait any longer. My colleague Jennifer Whitmore will be bringing forward a bill to give the regulator the power it needs, and I'm urging you to support this bill. Taoiseach, parents are eating less and skipping meals so their children can eat. Pensioners are cutting back on heating and living in fear of the weekly shop. They deserve answers. They deserve transparency. So Taoiseach, will you stop protecting profiteers and start protecting the public? And when will you give the food regulator the powers it needs to stop price gouging?
Thanks very much to Deputy O'Callaghan, and can I firstly say I'm very much aware that the cost of living crisis is still real for very many families across the country, and you've asked me a specific question, so I'm going to spend the time on that, but I do want to acknowledge that, and I do also want to acknowledge it's why government has taken a number of measures to protect the most vulnerable, including a very significant increase in the working family payment, expansion of the fuel allowance, the permanent reduction of the VAT rate on energy bills, but also the fact that the Christmas bonus, which is paid to pensioners, people with disabilities, factually the most vulnerable people from an income point of view, will also be paid in the coming days. And I know that makes a real difference to people at this period of time as well. You've asked a very specific question, and I acknowledge the work of my constituency colleague, Deputy Whitmore, in relation to this issue as well. And as you say, there was an independent agri-food regulator established back in 2023 under the Agriculture and Food Supply Chain Act, and it has two key functions: one, to enforce the law on unfair trading practices, and secondly, to perform price and market analysis and reporting functions. The Agri-Food Regulator has reported to my colleague, Minister Hayden, the Minister for Agriculture, that it does require more enhanced powers to compel businesses to provide information that's not in the public domain. And I believe this relates specifically to the price and market analysis function. And you've referenced, I think, some examples where there has been a real challenge or an inability to do that so far. The regulator does already have extensive powers to compel information when pursuing complaints under unfair trade and practice legislation. But this is more about the broader price and market analysis piece as well. I should also just say, before talking about expanding the powers, just to acknowledge they have also successfully secured a conviction under the Act, and just to acknowledge their work in relation to that. So Minister Hayden, I know, is fully committed to ensuring that the regulator is equipped with the necessary powers to fulfil its statutory function. He's had to go through a consultative and now indeed a legislative process, and this is required to ensure that the additional powers granted are proportionate. This is somewhat novel, and I only mean novel in a legal sense, in terms of trying to get this right, and obviously seeking legal advice and making sure that whatever we put in place stands up to the scrutiny of the law. I know Minister Hayden's department has engaged with key stakeholders in the supply chain, whether they're farm bodies, industry, retail representatives, departments, state agencies, and of course the Agri-Food Regulator himself as part of a detailed consultative process. There's been legal scrutiny now of a draft statutory instrument. As I said, the legislation is novel. It does exceed the requirements under European law. That's not a reason not to do it, but it does, and therefore it's essential that anything we do does stand up to legal robust scrutiny. But I'm pleased to assure Deputy O'Callaghan today that the process to deliver now on this commitment is significantly advanced. I understand that my colleague Minister Hayden expects to be in a position to sign that draft statutory instrument in the coming weeks, and no doubt will engage constructively with the Social Democrats and Deputy Whitmore on your proposals.
Taoiseach O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, the food regulator asked for these powers over a year ago. Why is it taking you so long to give them the powers that they need to do their job? When you go into a supermarket, Taoiseach, and you see people at the checkout not being able to buy items, having to return them, or leaving the supermarket stressed and worried about how are they going to meet their other bills during the week. This has gone on well over a year without your government acting. So are you going to sign these extra powers in this year? Is it going to happen in the next couple of weeks, in this year? Will you give us the detail on this? Are all the powers that the food regulator needs to compel supermarkets, processors and anyone else in the supply chain to hand over the data required so they can do their job? Are those full powers going to be in that in the next couple of weeks? Why have you delayed in this? Will they get the full powers? And will the food regulator now start going after price gouging? There's clear evidence of price gouging and of profiteering taking place and of the prices of food increasing way above input prices. So when is the government actually going to act on price gouging?
I'm trying to largely agree with you on this occasion too. So look, I accept there's been a period of time that it's taken since when the regulator said they needed these new powers to get to this point that we're at today and the point where we have a draft statutory instrument. But I would point out genuinely that those reasons are valid because this is a novel area. We're going beyond the requirement under European law. What we do has to be proportionate. We want to avoid any unintended consequences. You've referenced, in fairness, and you want to avoid that too, I know. There is a whole supply chain here, and we need to consult with all parts of that supply chain, with farming bodies, with industry, with retail representatives, with relevant government departments as well. And we have increased the budget, and Minister Hayden secured this funding for the agri-food regulator in the last budget as well, which enables them, I suppose, to prepare and begin the process in terms of those new significant powers and also hire the staff that will be necessary to do that. It is our expectation that this should be signed by the end of the year, but I do want to give the Minister the space just to get this right. But he's certainly working to try and get this done in a very short period of time, and he will engage and keep in touch with yourself and your party colleagues in this matter too.
Deputy Brian Stanley.
Taoiseach, yesterday we had the publication of the National Development Plan Review 2025, Securing Ireland's Future, Sectoral Investment in Transport. There's a number of bypasses needed in Laois, but it looks like the whole county was bypassed for funding. Now, you were down there this week last year, exactly 52 weeks ago, canvassing for the election. There's huge housing developments needed in Laois. There's been a rapid population growth. It's in one of the top 3 counties in terms of population growth in the last 3 years. There's huge pent-up demand for housing and for infrastructure. But we can't have the housing without the infrastructure. And throughout the county there's a need for roads, water services, wastewater, sewerage and electricity services to be expanded. The National Development Plan Review published yesterday 102 billion in funding between now and 2030 in capital funding. Back in July, you said on 22nd of July that by prioritising investment in water, energy and transport, we're laying the groundwork for 300,000 new homes. That's 50,000 a year. You won't be able to do it. Now, you prioritise Laois, and I'll come to that in a second, the Department of Local Government, what they have said about it. It can't happen without it. What they actually said in their national planning framework, what they've set out there is they projected the additional need for housing at 1,244 additional houses per annum, on top of what's already been provided. This is a huge expansion in population, Taoiseach. It's a 35% increase in population over the next 9 years is what's being projected. And this is on top of 5 years of very, very rapid growth. Laois, as I said, is in the top 3 in terms of population expansion. Now, you're asking the local authorities to own huge tracts of land, but without it being serviced, this will be useless, because people will have to get in and out by helicopter. There won't be roads for it. So the infrastructure is required or to install these housing projects. You can't build 1,300 or 400 houses per year unless these projects go ahead. And the roads that are critically needed is the Portlaoise Northern Orbital Route. The Mount Mellick Relief Road is critical. You saw that yourself when you were down last year. And to open up all that land, particularly across the north and west of Portlaoise, the Northern Orbital Route is required. Water services need to be expanded according to Ishcaran, according to this document, all the red lines in it, that shows where it's needed throughout the county, in Gracullen, in Borrisnostri, Balnakill, the Swan, Timahoney, wastewater improvements, Port Harrington, Durrow, Mountrath, Stradbally, Rathdowney and Ballylinan need expansion in water supply. So It's critical that we have this infrastructure for the council and for private developers to be able to provide the housing. So, will you go back to the drawing board with this review and ensure that Laois receives some funding, particularly for the Portlaoise orbital route and the Mount Mellick Relief Road, but also the expansion of wastewater and water services, because we cannot have houses unless we have services. It can't be done. We also need to relieve the congestion on the N80, and that can only be done by the Mount Mellick Relief Road and the Northern Orbital route in Portlaoise. Thank you.
Well, can I thank Deputy Stanley for raising these matters? And I was indeed in Laois, and I was indeed canvassing in the election, and I was delighted that my new colleague Deputy Willie Aird joined you in Dáil Éireann. Pardon me? I tell you, the promises that Willie Aird is going to keep, and he'll work with you constructively in relation to that as well, because we have a lot of work that we need to do to deliver for the people of Laois and the people of the Midlands. But I would say, and you make constructive points, and they're fair points in terms of, obviously we have to put the infrastructure in place to enable the housing capacity be delivered. That is a statement of fact. What you saw yesterday was another piece of the jigsaw in terms of an approval for a sectoral investment plan for transport under the NDP. This is a very significant increase in terms of a number of projects that we will be in a position to deliver approximately €9.7 billion in investment in roads, protecting and renewing existing roads, delivering many new national road projects, trying to mitigate against seasonal and climate-related impacts, rolling out EV charging infrastructure, and delivering new strategic regional roads as well. I should say, and I know the Minister for Transport did say, and was at pains to say yesterday on many occasions, and Minister Buttimer is here with us also, and Minister Canny, that this list is not exhaustive. This is a number of projects. This list is not exhaustive. This is a number of projects that will be delivered. There will also be an annual TII capital plan, and we expect that plan to come early in the new year. And there will also be opportunities, specifically in relation to the housing point, to look at how we can work with the likes of the Housing Activation Office. I see this in my own constituency, where if key infrastructure is funded through the Housing Activation Office or other structures, it actually opens up opportunities to develop and deliver further housing supply and further crucial infrastructure as well. So I always know when you publish a list, it very quickly becomes about not just what's on the list, but what's not. And that's why I know the Minister for Transport, while welcoming the sectoral investment plan, was clear, as is all of government, that this is not exhaustive, but it is about moving forward with some degree of clarity. There will be many further opportunities, including in relation to the TII capital plan, and we'll work very constructively with Laois deputies in this House. We'll also work very constructively with the local authority as well, specifically on the issue of water and wastewater. My own officials in the Department of Finance met with Uisce Éireann, I think last week, in the last couple of days anyway. I'm certainly very satisfied from my conversation that capital funding is not now the constraint in relation to Uisce Éireann. We have literally provided Uisce Éireann with billions of euro more funding. The capacity constraint here is the planning system, the regulatory system, and how we can actually get things done more quickly. And I will work constructively in relation to the projects that are needed in Laois in terms of water and wastewater. I also look forward to next February, when the rules change, to finally, a bit of common sense and allow developers actually on small-scale housing developments, or relatively small-scale, put in their own infrastructure around wastewater, which I believe will open up huge housing opportunities in many rural towns and villages. So I'm happy to continue to engage, and I'll send on the specific projects you referenced to the relevant ministers.
Stanley.
Thanks, the Department of Local Government, James Rowan's department, there is no point in them publishing lists like this and projecting growth, huge growth for a county, unless the infrastructure goes in along with it. And I didn't mention the need for health centres, schools, the courthouse in Portlaoise, by the way, as well, and many other things that are needed in the county. But what I would say to you is this, and the flood relief schemes, what I would say to you is this, is that if we're going to have sustainable development, we have to take into account transport. And at the moment, the N80 is trucks from the west of Ireland and everywhere else have to wind their way through the narrow streets of Mount Mellick and around the junction at Pearse Street and Patrick Street, Market Square, which is off yourself. In Portlaoise, they have to go in under the railway bridge. Sometimes they get caught under it, and in by the roundabout in the centre of the town. That road has to be taken off from the Mount Mellick Road across, has to be connected with the motorway on the northern side, northeastern side of Portlaoise. And I would appeal to you to go back to the drawing board with this. Now, I heard what you said, that it's not, there may be others to come, but you know yourself there's a list of documents on the back page of that, and you know when it's not listed on that, it's going to be a battle to do it. And I'm asking you to make sure that happens and the promises that were made before the election are kept. Or not good.
Well, they certainly will be. And when I look at the budget that was introduced just across the Irish Sea yesterday, I'm very thankful to be the Minister for Finance in a country where we're able to dramatically increase our capital investment. And that didn't happen by accident, Deputy. It happened due to the hard work and ingenuity of the Irish people, but it also happened as a result of the policies that my party, Fianna Fáil and others have delivered in government over the last several years. That has resulted in being able to run budget surpluses, put money into future funds, increase our social welfare payments to look after our pensioners, older people, carers, people with a disability, and make real differences in terms of public services too. I note in your second question, and understandably so, you expanded the area of projects across your county to other areas as is appropriate. Can I just say we've taken a decision to roll out a series of investment plans, so there will be in the coming days a number of further capital plan announcements in relation to health, in relation to disability, and indeed today in relation to childcare. Very, very significant amount of public capital funding for state-led public childcare, something I talked about a lot in the election and something that we're absolutely determined to deliver, so we'll keep in touch on Laois.
Peadar, Toibin.
Good morning, good to ask Corlia. Taoiseach, the Greater Dublin region is grinding to a halt. If you stand on any bridge now on the M50 in the morning and look north or south, a stationary line of cars stretches out as far as the eyes can see. And the cost of congestion is going to reach €1.5 billion by 2040. And Dublin is ranked the worst capital in Europe in terms of time and money wasted because of traffic congestion. And incredibly, a study has showed that the average speed of a car now is 12 kilometres an hour. That's slower than the horse-drawn carriages of the 19th century, believe it or not. Now, hundreds of thousands of people in this region are living in a commuter hell. Many parents are leaving before 6 o'clock in the morning and they're not back until 7 o'clock that evening, and they're lucky if they get time to even put their kids to bed. And I have no doubt that that's leading to the anxiety that many children are experiencing because they're separated for so long from their families. Now, volunteerism is also dying in many of the commuter hell areas at the moment because people have so little energy when they come back from their commute to be able to help in community activities. Now, the traffic congestion in the Greater Dublin area is grinding people down. A return journey for tens of thousands of people of Meath at the moment is taking 4.5 hours. It's on its way to a 5-hour return journey on a daily basis. Think about it, 20 hours a week commuting for a 40-hour working week. Meath is the biggest commuter county in the country, the only county in the country where the majority of workers leave the county every day to go to work. 90,000 commuters, 60,000 of those forced to use cars because of the lack of public transport. And Navan is the biggest town in the country without a rail line. In 1994, Fianna Fáil's Noel Dempsey promised to build the rail line from Navan to Dublin. Now Aisling Dempsey, his daughter, is promising the rail line. Their promise is now intergenerational. It's incredible. So right now, the current delivery from concept to completion is 42 years. That means that a person starting work in their early 20s when it was announced will have retired and be drawing the pension before it's actually delivered. In 1862, the same rail line was built in a matter of 3 years with picks and shovels. Now, yesterday, we saw the launch of the National Development Plan review. There was one mention of the Navan to Dublin rail line. No mention of any development in terms of progressing it faster, no ring-fence funds in terms of it. Bizarrely, there was a mention of building the stations on a line where they haven't even decided what direction they're going with the line itself. So on Thursday, the 4th of December, there will be a public meeting on the Meath on Track campaign in Meath. And all I'm asking you to do at this moment in time is to ask a senior transport minister to listen to the people of Meath and the frustration that exists in the country around this, and to attend that meeting and listen to exactly how it's affecting so many people in Meath. Will you commit to that here today?
Thanks, Deputy Taoiseach.
I think if I start making diary commitments for the Minister for Transport on the floor of the Dáil, I'll find myself in a peculiar situation, but I'll certainly pass on the request from you, Deputy, as I'm sure you'll be in touch with his office also. Let me say, I live in a county not too dissimilar to yours in terms of, absolutely not too dissimilar to yours in relation to commuter issues, and I do take the point that far too many people are spending far too long sitting in traffic, and I do take the societal points you make about the impact that that's having on quality of life. childcare arrangements, and a whole variety of other things, including, by the way, emissions in terms of people sitting in traffic as well. I would point out, and I want to directly address the transport issues, but it is why we need to have a really integrated conversation around work. And work in the 21st century. It's why Minister Alan Dillon and Minister Peter Burke are leading the consultation on remote working. This idea of everybody having to sit in their car and travel for 5 days, for hours and hours on end, when actually some people, not everybody, but some people can successfully work in their community in remote working hubs, connected hubs, or indeed in their home, can work for some businesses and can work for some public services. I look forward to the outcome of that. Look, yesterday we announced, or the Ministers for Transport announced, the Department of Transport capital ceilings for 26 to 2030, and you'll acknowledge by any a yardstick, it's a very significant increase in investment, and there's a breakdown in that for active travel, public transport, road networks, road safety, civil aviation, maritime transport safety and ICT. And you'll also note in that the largest budget for 2026 is in relation to 1.6 billion for the road network, closely followed though by 1.4 billion for public transport, rising to 2 billion in 27, 2.5 billion in 28, 2.3 billion in 29 and 1.9 billion in 2030. Now specifically on the issue of the Navan rail line, which I know is a very important issue in your constituency. The NTA's transport strategy for the Greater Dublin area does set out a framework for transport investment over that 20-year period, 22 to 42, and the issue of a rail connection between Dublin and Navan was re-examined as part of the development. The re-examination supported the development of a rail line from Dublin to Navan, so it's a fact that it is required, and the final strategy does include a delivery of the line subject to the various planning and funding approvals. In 2024, the NTA did allocate funding to Iarnmurdaran for the establishment of a design team to commence work on the Navan rail line project, and this work involves route option selection, planning and design phases of the project, and Iarnmurdaran commenced the procurement process for the pre-construction phase of the project and issued a tender to pre-qualified consultants at the end of May of last year. In November of last year, about a year ago, multidisciplinary consultants, RPS, were appointed by Iarnmurdaran for the duration of the project to work with the rail company's in-house project team. It's anticipated that a public consultation on the route options will now take place next year. That process will ultimately recommend the defined route and then allow the project to move forward to the business case stage, which will require it being approved in line with infrastructure guidelines as well. The Navan rail line is, as you say, mentioned in the NDP sectoral implementation plan. We had a debate earlier about what is and isn't mentioned. This is mentioned in the plan. We are committed to the delivery of it, and I would make one final point. You do reference times gone past, and I know you have a view on this too, but in times gone past I do reckon there was an awful lot less around regulatory and planning and delays and the likes as well, and we do need to see how we streamline that for important capital projects.
Thomas, you mentioned a number of stages in a multi-stage process. Each of those stages is taking longer than that actually took to build it in the 1860s with picks and shovels. And the National Development Review means very little. At best it's talking about the rail line being delivered by 2036, but there's already a landowner now talking about taking a judicial review against it, which is going to blow that out of the water. So this project is actually in reverse, because we were told that we were going to have the railway order in 2026, and now that's been pushed back to the end of 2027. You have increased the budgets, I agree, but those come after this country being second from the bottom in Europe for a 10-year period in terms of infrastructural spend in this country. And the truth of the matter is, no matter all the money you actually push on this, it doesn't matter unless you fix the disaster in terms of infrastructure builds in this country. Under your government, we have the slowest planning, permitting, licensing, tendering and judicial review systems in the whole of the European Union. And actually the response to the workers who are actually stuck in traffic at the moment is to hike up their tolls and hike up their fuel taxes. So some people in Meath at the moment are suggesting a toll strike, refusing to pay tolls on the roads. Some people in Meath are suggesting that they actually block traffic in Dublin in the same way that traffic has been blocked for them on a daily basis. I'm against that disruption myself. But what I would say, rather than going to those lengths, do your best, Minister, to see can you get a senior minister or public servant in that room on Thursday week in Navan to listen to the people and the crisis that they're going through.
Well, I generally believe it's very important for public officials to listen and engage, including those who have responsibility for the delivery of the projects in terms of the various agencies. And I'm sure if you reach out to the Minister's office, he can engage with you. And I'm sure you have, and I'll certainly pass this on as well. I'm in a point of agreement. Firstly, I disagree with the idea that the project's gone backwards. I very much believe this project is moving forward. That's why it's in our National Development Plan, the investment plan of yesterday. We will go to consultation on the preferred route in 2026. I think that's progress. I agree with you on the diagnosis of the challenge in terms of how we streamline infrastructure delivery. I ran, as you'll remember, because we were in debates on these issues, I ran an election campaign where my party heavily advocated for the need for a Department of Infrastructure. In our programme for government, we got a division in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform on infrastructure delivery. We're going to see the outworkings of that probably next week, certainly within the next 2 weeks, in terms of how we can streamline processes. I believe as Finance Minister, by the way, funding won't actually be the major challenge in terms of the delivery of most capital projects. It will be timelines and making sure that we can look at running some processes in parallel rather than waiting neatly for this to end and then this and then this. I mean, there's more gates here than you'd see in many country estates, and we need to look at how we can reduce that as well.
Thanks, Tony.